I'm Allison Parker, 32, and I found a letter that shattered my world. 3 months ago, I sat alone in my mother Rebecca's hospice room, watching her fade away. My stepfather Warren, stepsister Haley, and stepbrother Kyle refused to visit not once during her battle with terminal cancer. Their coldness confused and infuriated me. What could Mom have possibly done to deserve such abandonment? What I would discover in that letter would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to join our community of real-life storytellers. Trust me, what happened next in my journey is something you won't want to miss. The nightmare began 8 months ago with 4 words I'll never forget. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Mom had gone to her doctor complaining about persistent back pain and weight loss, thinking it might be a pulled muscle or stress. Instead, she received a death sentence. The oncologist gave her 6 months at most. She made it to 7, fighting every step of the way. I took immediate leave from my nursing job at Memorial Hospital to care for her. My supervisor Janet was understanding she'd lost her own mother to cancer just 2 years earlier. "Family comes first, Allison," she told me, squeezing my shoulder. "Your patients will be here when you're ready to come back." What I couldn't understand was why Warren, my stepfather of 15 years, suddenly became a ghost in our lives. At first, his excuses seemed plausible: urgent business meetings, client dinners, work trips. But as weeks passed, the pattern became undeniable. He was avoiding Mom. When he did come home to the house they'd shared for over a decade, he'd sleep in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb her rest. 3 weeks after her diagnosis, I confronted him in the kitchen while Mom slept upstairs. "She's dying, Warren. Your wife is dying, and you're barely here. What's going on?" His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "She made her choices," he said, voice cold as ice. "Now she has to live or die with them." I was stunned. "What choices? What are you talking about?" Warren just shook his head, grabbed his briefcase, and left for work. That pattern continued until, gradually, he stopped coming home altogether, moving into what he called a temporary apartment. My step-siblings followed their father's lead. Haley, 30, who lived just 20 minutes away, always had an excuse. Her kids were sick, she had a deadline for her graphic design job, her husband had the car. Kyle, 28, was more direct at least. "Dad says I shouldn't see her," he admitted over the phone. "I don't know what happened between them, but he's really adamant about it." What hurt most was how Mom accepted their absence with such resignation. When I railed against their behavior, she would just take my hand and say, "They have their reasons, Allie. Let it go." But I couldn't let it go. This was the woman who had become my mother when I was just 12, after my biological mom died in a car accident. She had never treated me as anything less than her own daughter. She'd attended every school play, helped me through my first heartbreak, cheered at my nursing school graduation. How could they abandon her now? As her condition deteriorated, our home became a medical outpost. I administered her medications, managed her pain pumps, changed bedsheets soaked with sweat from fevers. The hospice nurse, Maria, visited 3 times weekly, but the day-to-day care fell to me. The physical demands I could handle. My nursing training had prepared me for that. The emotional toll was another matter entirely. At night, after Mom finally drifted to sleep, I would scroll through old family photos on my phone: holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, Haley's wedding where we had all danced together. There was Warren, arm around Mom's waist, looking at her with what I had always believed was love. There were Kyle and I, pretending to fight over the last piece of birthday cake. We had been a real family once. What had happened? As Mom's pain increased and her lucidity decreased, I made the heart-wrenching decision to move her to Pinecrest Hospice. Our home wasn't equipped for the level of care she now needed, and I was running myself into the ground trying to be nurse, daughter, and housekeeper all at once. Her hospice room was pleasant enough: soft yellow walls, large windows overlooking a garden, but the absence of family made it feel sterile and lonely. I brought photos, her favorite quilt, fresh flowers daily, but nothing could fill the gaping hole left by Warren, Haley, and Kyle. I made one last attempt to bring the family together, calling each of them separately. "She won't be here much longer," I told Warren, not bothering to hide my tears. "Whatever happened between you, Can't you put it aside? She's dying. I've said all I need to say to Rebecca, he replied before hanging up. With each passing day, my confusion turned to anger, and my anger to a bone-deep exhaustion. What could possibly justify this complete abandonment of a dying woman? The hospice nurses called it actively dying, a clinical term for the body's final shutdown. Mom's breathing became more labored, her skin took on a yellowish pallor, and she slept most of the day. The cancer had ravaged her once healthy body, leaving her a fragile husk of the vibrant woman who had raised me. She weighed barely 90 pounds now, her hospital gown hanging off her shoulders like a child playing dress-up. Despite her deteriorating condition, we still had moments of connection. On good days, I'd read to her from her favorite Jane Austen novels, the familiar words seeming to soothe her even when she drifted in and out of consciousness. We'd watch old movies, Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's, her eyes occasionally lighting up at favorite scenes. I'd brush and braid her thinning hair, pretending not to notice how much remained on the brush afterward. "Remember when you taught me to French braid?" I asked one afternoon, my fingers working gently through her silver-streaked hair. I was so frustrated because I couldn't get it right. "You kept," she paused, catching her breath, "kept practicing on your dolls until all their hair fell out." Her laugh turned into a cough, but her smile remained. These precious moments were interspersed with my increasingly desperate attempts to bring our family back together. I called Haley daily, leaving voicemails that went from pleading to angry to broken. "She asked about the twins today," I said in one message, referring to Haley's 5-year-old daughters. "She has a gift for them in her bedside drawer." "Please, Haley. She won't be here much longer." When Haley finally returned my call, our conversation quickly devolved into an argument. "You don't understand, Allison," she snapped. "You weren't there. You don't know what she did." "Then tell me, what could possibly justify abandoning her like this?" Her voice lowered to a hiss. "Ask your mother what she did to Dad. Ask her why he has that scar across his stomach. Ask her, Allison." The call ended abruptly, leaving me stunned and confused. That evening, during a rare moment of clarity, I approached Mom about Haley's cryptic accusation. "Mom," I said carefully, sitting beside her bed, "Haley said something strange today, about Dad's scar, about you doing something to him." "What did she mean?" Mom's eyes, sunken but still alert, clouded with something fear, regret. She turned her gaze to the window. "Some secrets are better left buried, Allie, especially now." "But Mom, no." Her voice was surprisingly firm. "Promise me something instead." "In my jewelry box, the old wooden one from Grandma. After I'm gone, look inside. There's a compartment. Promise me you'll open it." "I promise," I said, squeezing her bony hand. "But Mom, you could tell me now, whatever it is?" "Too tired," she murmured, her eyelids fluttering closed. "Not your burden yet." Over the next 3 days, Mom's lucidity faded rapidly. She spoke in confused fragments, often mistaking me for her sister who had died years ago. Occasionally, disturbing phrases would emerge from her delirium. "Not my fault. He wouldn't stop. The knife was just there." "What knife, Mom?" I asked, but she had already drifted back to semi-consciousness. Sometimes she would become agitated, trying to get out of bed. "Have to hide it. Warren can't find it. The box." The hospice staff increased her morphine, explaining that agitation was common in final days. I stayed by her side, sleeping in the recliner beside her bed, holding her hand through the night. On her final evening, something changed. The restlessness ceased, and a strange calm settled over her. Her breathing slowed. The hospice nurse, checking vitals, gave me a knowing look. "It won't be long now," she said gently. "Keep talking to her. Hearing is the last sense to go." I climbed onto the narrow bed beside Mom, careful not to disturb her oxygen tube, and held her frail body against mine. "It's okay to go, Mom," I whispered. "I love you. Dad's waiting for you." I meant my biological father, though I wasn't sure if she could understand. "You're not alone. I'm right here." At 3:17 a.m., she took her last breath, a soft exhale that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken secrets. The room fell silent except for the suddenly deafening tick of the wall clock and my own muffled sobs. The funeral 3 days later was sparsely attended. A few of Mom's old colleagues, her hairdresser of 20 years, 2 neighbors, and me. No Warren, no Haley, no Kyle. I stood alone by her casket, placing a single white rose atop it before they lowered it into the ground. The solitude of that moment, the hollow echo of dirt hitting wood, would haunt my nightmares for months to come. 2 weeks after the funeral, I finally gathered the courage to return to Mom's house, the place that had been my childhood home after Dad died. The white colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch still looked the same from the outside, but it felt fundamentally changed, as if the house itself was mourning. Warren had moved out completely by then, taking only his clothes, personal items, and a few pieces of furniture he claimed predated their marriage. Everything else, Mom's clothes still hanging in the closet, her half-empty bottle of perfume on the vanity, her slippers by the bed remained untouched, suspended in time like a museum exhibit of interrupted life. I stood in the entryway, keys still in hand, overwhelmed by the task ahead. Every item I would need to sort, donate, or discard represented another goodbye. The house smelled faintly of Mom's signature lavender sachets and the lemon furniture polish she'd always used, scents that made my throat tighten with grief. One room at a time, I whispered to myself, a mantra from my nursing days when overwhelmed by a particularly difficult shift. I started with the kitchen, the space that felt least personal. Even there, memories ambushed me, Mom teaching me to make her famous apple pie, Sunday morning pancakes, holiday meals with the family gathered around the oak table. I found a grocery list in her handwriting on the refrigerator, dated just before her diagnosis. Eggs, coffee, Warren's favorite cereal. A snapshot of normalcy before everything fell apart. The living room was harder photo frames on every surface, most showing the now fractured family in happier times. I found myself studying Warren's face in these photos, searching for signs of the coldness that would later emerge. In most, he looked genuinely happy, his arm around Mom's shoulders, his smile reaching his eyes. One photo particularly caught my attention, the 5 of us at Kyle's college graduation 4 years earlier. We were positioned on the campus lawn, Kyle in his cap and gown, Warren and Mom on either side of him, Haley and I flanking them, everyone beaming with pride. I remembered that day clearly, the celebration dinner afterward, Warren toasting his son's accomplishments, Mom tearing up with joy. Nothing in that memory hinted at the family dissolution to come. I found a collection of photo albums in the hallway bookcase, chronologically arranged with Mom's typical organization. The earliest documented her life before I knew her, Rebecca Sullivan as a young woman, then her wedding to Warren Parker, becoming Rebecca Parker. A few pages were dedicated to Warren's first marriage and the birth of Haley and Kyle. Then came photos of my father and mother, their wedding, my birth, and early childhood. The album took a sad turn with sparse photos from the year my biological mother died, then brightened again with pictures of Warren and Mom's blended family vacations, holidays, school events, a visual timeline of our merged lives. But I noticed something odd as I flipped through the most recent album. The photos stopped abruptly about 5 years ago. The last pages remained empty, as if Mom had simply ceased documenting our lives. This timing couldn't be coincidental. It aligned perfectly with when I'd first noticed tension between Mom and Warren, when family gatherings became less frequent and more strained. By evening, I'd made little progress in actually clearing out anything. Instead, I'd spent hours lost in memories, piecing together a timeline that still made no sense. What had happened 5 years ago to begin this family fracture that would eventually leave Mom dying alone? I finally made my way upstairs to their bedroom. Warren had clearly packed in haste, dresser drawers left partially open, closet doors ajar. Mom's side remained intact, her reading glasses still on the nightstand, a dog-eared novel beside them. The antique jewelry box she'd mentioned sat on her dresser. Made of dark cherry wood with intricate carvings, it had belonged to her grandmother. I'd played with it as a child, fascinated by its tiny drawers and compartments. Now I approached it with apprehension, remembering her final request. The top section opened easily, revealing the jewelry I was familiar with: her pearl earrings, the sapphire pendant Warren had given her for their 10th anniversary, various costume pieces she'd collected over the years. But I couldn't find the secret compartment she'd mentioned. I examined the box carefully, pressing panels and sliding sections, finding nothing unusual. Frustrated, I set the box aside and continued exploring the room. On Mom's bookshelf stood her collection of classic novels. I pulled out her favorite, Pride and Prejudice, remembering how she'd read it aloud to me when I was a teenager. As I flipped through the worn pages, a small brass key taped to the inside back cover fell into my lap. My heart raced as I picked it up. This had to be what Mom wanted me to find. Returning to the jewelry box, I examined it again and noticed a nearly invisible seam along the bottom panel. When pressed, it revealed a small keyhole. The brass key fit perfectly, and with a soft click, a hidden drawer slid out from beneath the main compartment. Inside lay a single sealed envelope. Written on it in Mom's elegant handwriting were the words, "To my daughter, to be read when I'm gone." My hands trembled as I held the envelope. The weight of it, both literal and figurative, suggested multiple pages inside. The house had grown dark around me, the only light coming from the bedside lamp, casting long shadows across the room. I settled into Mom's reading chair by the window and carefully broke the seal. Inside were several handwritten pages, dated 5 years earlier. Mom's familiar script, usually so precise and even, appeared shaky in places, as if written under great emotional stress. I took a deep breath and began to read, "My dearest Allison, if you're reading this, I've left this world, and I've taken my secrets with me, or so everyone believes. But you deserve to know the truth about why our family fell apart, why Warren, Haley, and Kyle abandoned me in my final days, the truth I've protected you from for 5 years. It began with a mistake, Warren's, not mine, though I've paid the price for it. 5 years ago, I discovered financial documents Warren had hidden in his home office. Being tax season, I was gathering our records when I found bank statements for accounts I'd never seen before, offshore accounts with substantial deposits. At first, I thought perhaps he'd been saving for a surprise our 20th anniversary was approaching, but the amounts were staggering hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I confronted him that evening, his reaction wasn't anger but fear. He begged me to forget what I'd seen, but I pressed him, "Allie, I needed to understand." Finally, he confessed. He had been embezzling money from Marshall and Wyatt, the investment firm where he'd worked for nearly 2 decades. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as he grew bolder. His explanation was pathetic gambling debts he'd hidden from everyone, a secret addiction that had spiraled out of control. I was devastated. The man I'd trusted, the man who'd helped me rebuild my life after your father died, had been living a lie. I told him he needed to get help, to come clean to the company. He refused. When I threatened to report him myself if he wouldn't seek treatment, something in him changed. The Warren I thought I knew vanished, replaced by someone cold and dangerous. He lunged at me, Allie, his hands around my throat, shoving me against the kitchen counter. I'd never seen such rage in him. I reached blindly behind me as I struggled to breathe, my hand finding the handle of a knife on the cutting board. I didn't mean to hurt him, I only wanted him to let me go. But when I swung out in panic, the blade sliced across his abdomen. There was so much blood, I thought I'd killed him. I called 911 immediately, told them my husband had been injured. At the hospital, they said the cut was deep but had miraculously missed vital organs. Warren required emergency surgery and 57 stitches. When the police questioned us, Warren told them it was an accident that he'd been cutting vegetables and slipped. I was too shocked, too confused to contradict him. Later, when we were alone in his hospital room, he made his position clear. "If you ever tell anyone what really happened about the money, about this, I'll make sure you go to prison for attempted murder." Who do you think they'll believe? The respected financial advisor or the hysterical wife with a knife? I realized then I was trapped. If I reported his crimes, he would twist the stabbing incident against me. If I left him, same outcome. He used that leverage to ensure my silence, all while systematically turning Haley and Kyle against me. He told them I had attacked him in a fit of rage over suspicions he was having an affair, a complete fabrication, but delivered with such conviction that they believed him without question. He played the victim masterfully, portraying me as unstable and dangerous. Over the next months, he emptied our joint accounts, claiming he needed to protect assets from my erratic behavior. He controlled all aspects of our finances, giving me an allowance like a child. When I objected, he would simply touch the scar on his stomach and ask if I wanted Haley and Kyle to know the whole truth. I endured this emotional prison for years, watching my relationship with my stepchildren deteriorate as Warren poisoned them against me. I stayed because leaving meant losing what little connection I had left with the family we once were. I stayed because I feared what Warren might do if I didn't. I stayed because, despite everything, I still foolishly hoped for reconciliation. But I wasn't entirely helpless. I gathered evidence of Warren's crimes, documents, bank records, transfer confirmations, anything I could access without his knowledge. I kept them in a safety deposit box at First National Bank on Maple Street, box number 722. The key is enclosed with this letter. Also inside is evidence of Warren's gambling addiction and documentation of his emotional abuse. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this while I was alive. I wanted to protect you from being forced to choose sides, from having your relationship with Warren, Haley, and Kyle destroyed as mine was. Perhaps that was another mistake. Perhaps you would have been strong enough to handle the truth. You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for. I don't know what you'll choose to do with this information. That decision is yours alone. But know that whatever happened between Warren and me, whatever lies he told, my love for you never wavered. You were my daughter in every way that matters. With all my love, Mom. P.S. The safety deposit box can be accessed with the enclosed key and my death certificate. The coordinates are 41.3827 degrees north, 72.9424 degrees west. I read the letter twice more, tears blurring my vision. The mother I thought I knew, soft-spoken, accommodating, sometimes frustratingly passive, had been fighting a silent battle for years. She'd endured isolation and emotional abuse to protect me and, in her own way, to protect Haley and Kyle too. The Warren revealed in this letter was a stranger, manipulative, threatening, possibly dangerous. Yet he'd been part of my life for 15 years. I'd trusted him, loved him as a second father. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, along with the small key to the safety deposit box. Whatever came next, I needed proof beyond Mom's words. I needed the evidence she'd gathered. The First National Bank on Maple Street opened at 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:45, having barely slept, clutching Mom's letter, her death certificate, and the safety deposit box key. The morning was unseasonably cold for April, or perhaps it was just the chill of anticipation that made me shiver as I waited in my car. When the doors finally opened, I approached the service desk, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Diane, listened patiently as I explained my situation. "I'll need to see your ID and the death certificate," she said. "And there will be some paperwork since you're accessing a deceased person's box." 20 minutes and several forms later, Diane led me to a secure room lined with metal boxes of various sizes. She located box 722, inserted her master key, then gestured for me to use Mom's key. With both keys turned, the box slid out smoothly. "Take all the time you need," Diane said, leaving me alone with the contents. The box contained several manila folders, each meticulously labeled in Mom's handwriting: financial records, bank statements, gambling evidence, personal journal, legal correspondence. Mom had been thorough, methodically documenting Warren's crimes and the aftermath. The financial records folder contained photocopies of checks Warren had written to himself from company accounts, disguised as vendor payments to shell companies. Bank statements showed regular transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Printouts of company financial reports with discrepancies highlighted in Mom's neat hand. The gambling evidence was equally damning: receipts from casinos across 5 states, credit card statements showing cash advances at gaming establishments, IOUs from private poker games. One document particularly stood out: a letter from Desert Palms Casino in Las Vegas, informing Warren he had exceeded his credit limit and would need to settle his $175,000 debt before gambling privileges would be restored. Most disturbing was a folder containing photographs Mom with bruises on her arms, dated timestamps in the corners. Her face never appeared in these photos, likely taken secretly as documentation. Accompanying them were pages from her personal journal, detailing instances of Warren's emotional and occasional physical abuse. The 3rd of April 2018, Warren shoved me into the wall when I asked about the credit card bill. Said if I ever questioned his spending again, he would make sure Haley and Kyle never spoke to me again. the 17th of June 2018. Found more bank statements. Warren caught me looking. Grabbed my wrist so hard it left marks. Said I was paranoid, delusional. Made me doubt myself for hours afterward. But the numbers don't lie. The 29th of September 2018, Warren told Haley I've been unstable. She called today, asked if I was taking my medication. I'm not on any medication, the gaslighting is working. The legal correspondence folder contained consultations with an attorney named James Merritt, discussing options for reporting Warren's embezzlement and protecting herself from his threats. The lawyer had advised her to gather evidence, but warned that Warren's counter-accusation of attempted murder would create a complicated legal situation. One letter, dated just 3 years ago, laid out a potential immunity deal in exchange for testimony against Warren, but a handwritten note in the margin read, "Can't do it." Would lose K and H completely. The final folder contained emails Warren had sent to his own attorney, which Mom had somehow obtained. In these, Warren discussed strategies for insulating assets from wife's interference and concerns about Rebecca potentially discovering extent of financial activities. Most revealing were transcripts of text messages between Warren and Haley and Kyle, carefully documenting how he had manipulated them. Warren to Haley, "Your stepmother isn't well. She's making wild accusations because she feels guilty about what she did to me. Best keep your distance for now. I don't want her turning on you or the twins." Warren to Kyle, "Son, I know this is hard to hear, but Rebecca attacked me out of nowhere. The doctors say I'm lucky to be alive. She's denying it now, says it was an accident, but I saw the look in her eyes. Keep your distance. I'm worried about what she might do next." By the time I'd reviewed everything, 3 hours had passed. My hands shook as I replaced the documents in their folders. The evidence was overwhelming and painted a clear picture. Warren had embezzled money to cover gambling debts, threatened and abused Mom when she discovered his crimes, and then systematically turned her stepchildren against her through calculated lies. For 5 years, Mom had endured this silent torment, maintaining the facade of a normal life while gathering evidence against the man who had destroyed our family, all while protecting me from the ugly truth. As I left the bank, the weight of the evidence now in my shoulder bag felt like both a burden and a weapon. I finally understood why our family had fractured, why Mom had been abandoned in her final days. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. I arranged to meet Warren at Riverside Cafe, a busy coffee shop in downtown Hartford. Public enough that I felt safe, quiet enough that we could talk without being overheard. I arrived 30 minutes early, selecting a corner table with my back to the wall, the folder of key documents beside me. Warren arrived precisely on time, dressed in his typical business attire navy suit, red tie, polished shoes. At 59, he still cut an impressive figure, silver hair perfectly styled, posture straight and confident. Looking at him now, knowing what I knew, I wondered how I'd never seen the coldness behind his smile. "Allison," he nodded, sitting across from me. "I'm glad you called. I've been meaning to discuss the house. I assume you're finally cleaning it out?" "No condolences, no acknowledgement of Mom's death, just business." "I've started," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Found some interesting things." "Oh?" His tone was casual, but I noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. "I'm curious," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "Do you remember which company you worked for about 5 years ago, before you moved to Hartford Investment Group?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Marshall and Wyatt. Why?" "Just trying to organize some of Mom's old tax documents," I lied smoothly. "She kept everything so meticulously labeled by year and employer." "That sounds like Rebecca," he said, relaxing slightly. "Always organized to a fault." "Speaking of organized," I continued, "I found some interesting financial records while cleaning out her office. Accounts I wasn't familiar with." Warren's casual demeanor slipped for just a second, a flash of something like panic crossing his features before he composed himself. "Oh? Well, I handled most of our finances. Rebecca probably kept copies of statements out of habit." "These weren't just any accounts," I pressed, watching his reaction carefully. "Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, significant sums." The color drained from Warren's face. "Allison," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, "I don't know what you think you found, but Rebecca was confused about many things toward the end. Cancer medications can cause delusions. She wasn't delusional when she documented your embezzlement from Marshall and Wyatt, I said quietly. Or when she photographed the bruises you left on her arms. Or when she saved the receipts from your gambling sprees. Warren's expression hardened, his eyes darting around the cafe as if checking who might be listening. You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything, Warren. About the money you stole. About how you threatened her when she found out. About how you turned Haley and Kyle against her with lies about her attacking you unprovoked. His demeanor shifted entirely now, voice becoming a threatening hiss. She swore she'd never tell. That bitch couldn't even keep her mouth shut in death. The naked hatred in his voice shocked me, even after everything I'd learned. I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the table between us. I'm recording this conversation, I said calmly. Just like Mom recorded many of your threats to her. Warren's hand shot across the table, grabbing for my phone. I snatched it away, but his sudden movement knocked over my coffee cup, sending hot liquid cascading onto the floor. Several nearby patrons turned to stare. Sir, is there a problem? A barista approached our table, concern evident in her expression. No problem, I said quickly. Just an accident. Warren stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This conversation is over, he snarled. You'll regret this, Allison. You have no idea what you're getting into. He stormed out, leaving me shaken but resolved. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I'd anticipated, Warren revealing his true nature when cornered, making threats instead of denials. I returned to Mom's house that evening to continue sorting through her belongings, my mind still reeling from the confrontation. As I turned onto her street, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door stood slightly ajar, light spilling out onto the porch. I hadn't left it that way. I parked across the street and called 911, reporting a possible break-in. The dispatcher advised me to stay in my car until officers arrived, but concern for what might be happening to Mom's possessions and the evidence I'd left inside overrode my caution. Entering carefully through the back door, I moved silently through the kitchen. I could hear someone rummaging frantically upstairs drawers, opening and closing, items being tossed aside. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer as a makeshift weapon and crept up the stairs. Mom's bedroom was in chaos, dresser drawers pulled out and emptied, mattress askew, closet contents strewn across the floor. The jewelry box lay smashed on the ground, its compartments pried open. In the center of this destruction stood Warren, still in his business suit, now rumpled and sweat-stained. Where is it? He demanded when he saw me. Where's the rest of it? Not here, I said firmly, keeping my distance. And not anywhere you'll find it. The police are on their way, Warren. You should leave. You think I'm afraid of the police? He sneered, taking a step toward me. It's your word against mine. Respected businessman versus grieving, emotionally unstable daughter. Who do you think they'll believe? Before he could say more, red and blue lights flashed through the windows, followed by the sound of car doors slamming. Warren's face contorted with rage, but he pushed past me and rushed down the stairs. I heard the back door slam just as officers entered through the front. Detective Jennifer Mitchell took my statement, her experienced eyes taking in the ransacked room. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the steady gaze of someone who'd seen it all. And you believe your stepfather was looking for evidence of financial crimes? She asked, notepad in hand. Yes, I replied, describing the documents I'd found in Mom's safety deposit box. I confronted him today about embezzlement from his former employer. He must have come here looking for what else she might have hidden. Embezzlement is a serious accusation, Detective Mitchell said carefully. Do you have copies of these documents? Not with me. They're in a secure location. I hesitated, then added, my mother documented everything, not just the financial crimes, but also emotional abuse, threats. She was afraid of him. Detective Mitchell's expression softened slightly. Bring everything to the station tomorrow. We'll take your formal statement and review the evidence. In the meantime, I suggest you don't stay here tonight. Do you have somewhere safe to go? I nodded, thinking of my apartment in Boston, a 2-hour drive away but far from Warren's reach. As I left the house, stepping carefully around the officers dusting for fingerprints, I realized that the confrontation with Warren had escalated far beyond what I'd anticipated. There was no going back now, only forward into whatever justice might look like for Mom. 2 days later, I sat on a bench in Madison Park, the place where our blended family had once held summer picnics and played frisbee on Sunday afternoons. The spring weather had turned mild, cherry blossoms dotting the paths with pale pink petals. I'd chosen this location deliberately neutral ground steeped in happier memories. Haley arrived first, her expression guarded as she approached. At 30, she looked strikingly like a younger version of Warren, same determined jaw, same direct gaze. She sat beside me without a greeting, leaving significant space between us. "This better be important," she said. "I had to get a sitter for the twins." "It is," I assured her. "We need to wait for Kyle." We sat in uncomfortable silence until Kyle appeared 10 minutes later, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders hunched. At 28, he'd grown into a tall, lean man with Mom's gentle eyes, though now they regarded me with suspicion. "Let's make this quick," he said, remaining standing. "Dad says we shouldn't even be talking to you." "That's exactly why we need to talk," I replied, gesturing to the empty space beside me. "Please, Kyle, give me 15 minutes. Reluctantly, he sat, and I opened my bag, removing a folder containing copies of the key documents from Mom's safety deposit box. "I need to tell you what really happened 5 years ago," I began. "Not Warren's version, the truth." "We know the truth," Haley interrupted. "She attacked Dad with a knife, nearly killed him, then denied it and tried to make him look crazy." "That's what he told you," I acknowledged. "But it's not what happened. Mom discovered Warren was embezzling money from his company to cover gambling debts. When she confronted him, he attacked her. The knife was self-defense." Kyle scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Dad doesn't even gamble." "These say otherwise," I said, handing them each a copy of the casino receipts and credit card statements. "And this is what Mom found 5 years ago." I passed them the copies of the offshore account statements and forged company checks. They studied the documents with increasing unease. Kyle's brow furrowed in concentration. Haley's hands began to tremble slightly. "This doesn't prove anything," Haley said, but her voice lacked conviction. "These could be faked." "Mom kept a journal," I continued, passing them excerpts. "She documented everything Warren's threats, how he manipulated all of us, and she saved these." The photos of Mom's bruised arms elicited the first real reaction. Kyle's face paled. Haley's hand went to her mouth. "I don't understand," Kyle said finally. "Dad told us she'd become paranoid, delusional, that she attacked him during an argument about an affair she imagined he was having." "He lied," I said simply. "He needed to discredit her so she couldn't expose his crimes. And he used you two to punish her, knowing that losing her family would hurt more than anything else he could do." "No," Haley shook her head, though doubt had clearly taken root. "Dad made us promise never to see her again. He said she was dangerous, unstable." "And you believed him without question?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "You didn't think it was strange that the woman who raised you, who loved you, suddenly became a violent monster?" "You weren't there the night it happened," Kyle said defensively. "You were away at nursing school. Dad called us from the hospital. He was terrified." "Of course he was terrified," I countered. Mom had discovered he was a criminal. His whole life was about to fall apart. We fell into silence, the weight of revelation settling over us. A group of children ran past, laughing as they chased a ball, the sound jarring against our somber mood. "There's more," I said finally, showing them the text messages Warren had sent them, which Mom had somehow obtained. "He was calculating about turning you against her." Haley's composure finally broke as she read the messages, tears streaming down her face. "I told the twins their grandmother was too sick for visitors," she whispered. "They never got to say goodbye." Kyle stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench. "Why didn't she tell us?" he demanded. "Why keep this secret for 5 years?" "She was protecting you," I explained. "Warren threatened to ruin her if she exposed him. She feared what that conflict would do to you, to the family. So she just suffered in silence?" Kyle's voice cracked. "While we treated her like she was nothing?" "She made her choice," I said gently. "Right or wrong, she thought it was best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" Haley's grief turned to anger. "Look where we are now. She died alone, thinking we hated her." "She knew you were victims too," I assured her. "She never blamed either of you." Kyle sank back onto the bench, head in his hands. I can't believe we abandoned her. At the end, when she needed us most, the three of us sat together as the afternoon light faded, sharing stories of Mom, piecing together the fractured timeline of the past 5 years. Kyle revealed that Warren's behavior had grown increasingly erratic recently, with mounting financial problems and unexplained absences. He's in trouble again, Kyle admitted. Massive debt. The house he moved into after leaving Mom is being foreclosed on. He asked me for a loan last month, $40,000, said it was temporary. The gambling never stopped, I concluded. And without Mom to serve as his cover, he's running out of options. As dusk settled over the park, we reached a decision together. The evidence Mom had gathered wouldn't just stay hidden in a safety deposit box. We would take it to the police, all three of us, and support each other through whatever came next. It won't bring Mom back, Haley said, wiping away tears. But at least she'll have justice. Walking to our cars, Kyle paused, looking back at the park bench where our family had begun to heal. She'd be proud of you, Allison, he said quietly, for bringing us back together. She'd be proud of all of us, I corrected him, for finding our way back to the truth. The Hartford Police Department's Economic Crimes Division occupied a sterile, fluorescent-lit corner of the precinct building. Detective Jennifer Mitchell met us in a conference room, coffee cups and legal pads arranged neatly on the table. Her colleague, Detective Marcus Walsh from the Domestic Violence Unit, joined us shortly after. The formal filing of charges was a grueling process, statements recorded, evidence cataloged, timelines established. We spent nearly 6 hours detailing Warren's financial crimes, his threats against Mom, and the elaborate web of manipulation he had woven around our family. Miss Parker, Detective Mitchell said, studying the offshore account documents, these transfers alone constitute major federal crimes. If your mother documented all this, why didn't she come forward? I explained about Warren's counterthreat, how he'd twist the stabbing incident to portray Mom as the aggressor, potentially facing attempted murder charges herself. Classic abuser tactic, Detective Walsh noted grimly. Create a situation where the victim fears the consequences of reporting more than they fear staying silent. The investigation moved with surprising speed after our initial report. Marshall and Wyatt, Warren's former employer, had apparently suspected financial irregularities for years but lacked concrete evidence to pursue charges. Our documentation provided the missing pieces. 2 weeks after our report, Warren was arrested at Hartford International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico with 3 suitcases and over $50,000 in cash. The news coverage was immediate and brutal. Prominent financial advisor arrested for embezzlement and domestic abuse. Warren Parker charged with stealing millions from former employer. Dying wife's hidden evidence brings down abusive husband. The legal process that followed was a maze of hearings, depositions, and procedural motions. Warren hired Preston Malloy, a high-profile defense attorney known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. At the arraignment, Warren pleaded not guilty to all charges, his attorney characterizing the case as a vindictive campaign orchestrated by a grieving, emotionally unstable stepdaughter. The pretrial hearings were particularly difficult. Seated in the courtroom, I had to listen as Warren's attorney portrayed Mom as mentally unstable, vindictive, even potentially violent. He challenged the admissibility of her journal entries and photographs as hearsay from beyond the grave. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Eleanor Hargrove, rejected most of these challenges, allowing the majority of Mom's evidence to stand. 3 months into the process, as the trial date approached, Warren's attorney approached me outside the courthouse. Preston Malloy was every inch the slick lawyer stereotype: Italian suit, alligator shoes, artificial smile. Miss Parker, he began smoothly, my client is prepared to make a very generous settlement offer. He'll plead guilty to reduced charges, misdemeanor financial improprieties in exchange for dropping all domestic abuse allegations. You and your step-siblings would receive substantial financial compensation for your emotional distress. The offer was tempting in its simplicity, an end to the grueling court appearances, the media attention, the constant reopening of emotional wounds. But I remembered Mom's isolation, her suffering, the lonely hospice room where she had died. My mother deserved justice, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily, and now she'll get it. Tell your client we'll see him in court. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Warren maintained the facade of respectability, immaculately dressed, appropriately somber, occasionally dabbing at non-existent tears when Mom's name was mentioned. But as the evidence mounted, his carefully constructed image began to crumble. Financial experts testified to the sophisticated nature of his embezzlement scheme and the substantial sums involved, over $3.7 million, diverted to personal accounts over a decade. Casino representatives confirmed his regular presence and substantial losses at their establishments. Former colleagues described his increasing paranoia and erratic behavior in the years before his departure from Marshall and Wyatt. Most damaging was the testimony from Haley, Kyle, and me describing Warren's manipulation, his lies, the family he had deliberately torn apart to protect himself. Haley broke down on the stand when describing her last conversation with Mom, a brief, cold phone call where she had refused to bring her children to visit their dying grandmother. "I'll never forgive myself for that," she said through tears. "And I'll never forgive him for making me believe it was the right thing to do." The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Warren's face remained impassive as the forewoman read the charges: 27 counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, tax evasion, witness intimidation, and domestic abuse. Judge Hargrove did not hold back during sentencing. "Mr. Parker," she said, fixing him with a steely gaze, "you abused not just the trust of your employer but the sacred trust of your family. You isolated and terrorized your wife during her final years, and cruelly deprived her of the comfort of her children as she faced death. This court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 12 years. As the bailiff led Warren away, he turned to glare at me, a look of pure hatred that would have once terrified me. Now I met his gaze unflinchingly, feeling not triumph but a quiet sense that some balance had been restored to the universe. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Kyle, Haley, and I had prepared a brief response, which I delivered while they stood supportively at my sides. Rebecca Parker was a loving mother who protected her family even when it meant enduring years of isolation and abuse. Today's verdict cannot restore the years stolen from us, but it ensures that the truth she fought to preserve will be her lasting legacy. We ask for privacy as our family begins to heal. As we walked away from the courthouse, arm in arm, I felt Mom's presence more strongly than I had since her death, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the quiet strength that had sustained her through her ordeal and now flowed through her children. The justice we had won felt bittersweet, necessary, but arriving too late for the woman who deserved it most. 1 year after Warren's conviction, Haley, Kyle, and I gathered at Cedar Hill Cemetery, where Mom's simple headstone stood beneath a weeping willow. The spring weather was perfect: warm sunshine, gentle breeze, birds calling from nearby trees. We brought her favorite flowers, yellow roses and purple irises, and arranged them in the stone vase embedded in the ground. "I can't believe it's been a year," Haley said softly, adjusting the flowers. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime." Kyle nodded, his hand resting on the cool granite of the headstone. "I keep thinking about all the things I should have said to her, all the chances I missed." "She knew you loved her," I assured him. Even through everything Warren did, she never doubted that. We had each traveled our own path of healing over the past year. For me, it had been weekly sessions with Dr. Abigail Winters, a therapist specializing in family trauma. The early sessions had been brutal, unpacking not just my grief over Mom's death, but my anger toward Warren, my complicated feelings toward Haley and Kyle, and my guilt over not recognizing what was happening sooner. Grief isn't linear, Dr. Winters had reminded me often. Neither is healing. You'll have good days and bad days, sometimes in the same hour. She had been right. Some days I could focus on the happy memories of Mom, her laugh, her terrible singing voice, the way she always remembered everyone's favorite foods. Other days, I was consumed by images of her suffering alone, gathering evidence in secret, enduring Warren's abuse while maintaining a brave face for me. Haley had found her own path forward by returning to school for a master's degree in counseling, specializing in domestic abuse victims. "I want to recognize the signs I missed with Mom," she'd explained. "I want to help other families before they're torn apart." Her twins, now 6, had become a regular presence in my life. We had weekend sleepovers where I would tell them stories about their grandmother, not the painful final chapter, but the decades of love and warmth that preceded it. Kyle had channeled his regret into action, establishing the Rebecca Parker Memorial Scholarship at Hartford Community College, where Mom had taken night classes in literature for years. The scholarship supported women returning to education after facing personal hardships, a fitting tribute to Mom's resilience and love of learning. "Did you bring it?" Haley asked, interrupting my thoughts. I nodded, reaching into my bag for the small tree sapling we had selected together, a Japanese maple that would eventually grow into a graceful, red-leaved presence beside Mom's grave. Kyle had already prepared the spot, and together we planted the tree, each adding a handful of soil to secure its roots. "To new beginnings," Kyle said, patting down the earth around the slender trunk. "Mom would have liked this, I think." "She would have loved it," I agreed, especially knowing it came from all of us together. After leaving the cemetery, we gathered at my new apartment for dinner. I had finally sold Mom's house 3 months earlier, none of us able to feel comfortable there after everything that had happened. Warren's assets had been liquidated to pay restitution to Marshall and Wyatt, but the house had remained in Mom's name, providing each of us with a modest sum to make fresh starts. Over pasta and wine, we continued sharing memories of Mom, finding joy in the good times that had once seemed overshadowed by the painful end. "Remember when she tried to teach us all to ice skate?" Kyle laughed. "And she was terrible at it, but pretended she was an expert?" "And then she fell and took Dad down with her," Haley added, her use of Dad for Warren still occasional and complicated. "They both ended up soaking wet." "She never did anything halfway," I smiled, even being bad at ice skating. As the evening wound down, I remembered something I'd been meaning to share. "I found something last week," I said, retrieving a small box from my bedroom. It was in an old book of Mom's that I kept. Inside was an unopened letter, similar to the one that had started our journey to the truth, but dated just 2 months before her death. The envelope simply read Allison in Mom's handwriting, more shaky and uncertain than the previous letter. "Should we?" Haley gestured uncertainly at the letter. "I think we should all hear it," I decided, carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a single page, written during what must have been one of Mom's more lucid periods in hospice. "My dearest Allison, by now you've discovered the truth I kept hidden for so long. Perhaps you've even shared it with Haley and Kyle, though I never wanted to force that burden upon you. If they're reading this with you now, I want them to know I never blamed them for staying away. Warren's manipulation was expert and calculated. He knew exactly how to turn children against a parent. I've had a lot of time to think in this hospice bed, watching the seasons change through my window. I've thought about choices, mine, Warren's, all of ours. I've wondered if I made the right decision in keeping silent all these years. Perhaps if I had fought harder, suffered the consequences of exposing Warren sooner, things might have ended differently. But I've come to believe that regret is a poison that serves no purpose. I endured Warren's abuse and isolation because I believed it was protecting my family from something worse. Whether that was right or wrong doesn't matter now. It was the choice I made with the information and strength I had at the time. My greatest hope is that somehow, someday, the truth would emerge. Not for vengeance, I've never wanted that, but because truth has a healing power that silence never will. True family stands by you at your darkest hour. Remember that I never truly left you, and now you have found each other again. Love is stronger than deception. Truth is more powerful than manipulation. And family, real family, is defined not by blood or marriage, but by who remains when the storms of life are at their worst. I love you all, forever and always. Mom." We sat in silence after I finished reading, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Haley spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "She forgave us, even though we didn't deserve it. That's who she was," Kyle said quietly. "Even at the end, she was thinking about us, not herself." The letter brought both pain and healing. Another piece of Mom returned to us, another chance to hear her voice and wisdom. In the months that followed, we would read it again many times, finding new meaning in her words as our own healing progressed. 6 months later, we gathered again, this time at Hudson Park, where we'd planted a memorial bench in Mom's name. The Japanese maple we'd planted at her grave had taken root successfully, its first new leaves unfurling in brilliant crimson. The 3 of us, once fractured by Warren's manipulations, now slowly rebuilding our connections, sat together on Mom's bench, watching families enjoy the summer afternoon. "She would have loved seeing us together like this," Haley observed, her arm linked through mine. She does see it, I replied with certainty. Somehow, I know she does. The truth had indeed proven more powerful than Warren's manipulations. Mom's careful documentation, her refusal to let her story end with his lies, had not only brought her justice, but had returned to us the family she had fought so hard to protect. In finding the truth, painful as it was, we had found our way back to each other and to the memory of the remarkable woman who had loved us through it all. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about your family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that healing from family trauma takes time, and sometimes the most important step is simply breaking the silence. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life journeys of healing and redemption. And if you know someone who might be suffering in silence, please share this video. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, truth, no matter how painful, is always the first step toward healing.